It is hard not to be impressed by Warwick, a town filled with a history that stretches back at least 1,100 years. Its centre boasts graceful Georgian streets, a picturesque medieval castle, and one of the most exquisite churches in all of Britain. The town's design after the Great Fire of 1694 is one of harmony, and is accentuated at regular intervals with its proud and boldly designed public buildings. At the centre of the town is the Marketplace Museum, housed in the grand 17th century market hall. The museum reopened its doors again in February this year, after undergoing a much-needed £1 million refurbishment. As soon as you walk through the sliding glass doors, the recent changes are instantly noticeable. Immediately on one's left, one is greeted by a very old friend, the Warwickshire Museum's brown bear, who I'm glad to say is still here to welcome visitors to this wonderful museum. Of course, their popular natural history and taxidermy displays are still very much at the core of their offering. So too is the marvellous Sheldon tapestry, allowing visitors to glimpse Warwickshire as Shakespeare would have known it. However, I've come to see something rather special which is on display upstairs. And here it is. Not many people know that the Warwickshire Museum owns an incredibly rare 16th century lute. The lute, a plucked string instrument and an early ancestor of the guitar, was one of the primary instruments of the 16th and 17th centuries. Indeed, this beautiful wooden musical instrument was actually made around 450 years ago by Hans Frei, one of the Stradivariuses of the lute world. We know that makers like Frei probably made hundreds, if not thousands, of instruments during their lifetimes, but only around 4 or 5 of his have survived into modern times. The others are actually in some of the best museums of the world. It is an absolutely beautiful looking thing, and is covered in decoration and elaborate inlay work. Although the core of the instrument dates to around 1550, in truth, most of the decoration dates to probably a century later, when the instrument was transformed and a new neck was added to allow it to be strung with more strings, allowing for a greater range. This means, incredibly, that this instrument was played and enjoyed for over a century after it was initially made. Where did it come from? Well, we know that its maker, luthier Hans Frei, was working in Bologna, Italy. If his name sounds German, well, that's because he was. Most luthiers of great renown working in Italy were Germans, a fascinating fact in itself. Who was its first owner? The truth is, we know so little about this instrument's history. It only emerged at auction in the late 1940s, where it was purchased by a rather interesting collector and academic called Eric Halfpenny. Halfpenny was a founding member of the Galpin Society, a group interested in the history and construction of musical instruments. It was Halfpenny's connection to this wonderful museum and its curators that allowed the museum to purchase the lute in 1964. And honestly, it's such a thrill to see it on display again. It hasn't been for at least several decades now, I think. I've managed to catch up with the museum's curator of human history, Sarah Ware, who answers some of my questions about the new displays. So Sarah, can you explain the layout of the new galleries? What were the motivation and inspiration behind the new displays?
Well, when we came to look at the project and we were applying for our Heritage Lottery Fund grant, we started to look at how the museum was laid out and thinking how we'd like to improve it. It had been the same for about 30, some displays actually 40 years old. So we looked at what people want from a museum, as well as what stories we wanted to tell. And we realised that actually myself and the curator of natural sciences had been quite frustrated with the original layout. The galleries were subject specific. The gallery we're now standing in was the archaeology gallery, there was a natural history gallery, and downstairs there was a geology gallery. And we realised that people don't see the world in those kind of subject-specific ways. So we wanted to build an integrated story. We wanted to tell the story of Warwickshire, or the stories of Warwickshire, through the objects that we have in our collection, through sort of other people's stories about those objects and their experiences in Warwickshire. With some public consultation, we looked at themes that would be overarching, and the themes that came out from our consultation were living here, made here, and getting here.
So can you tell us more about the new display of musical instruments here in the museum?
Yes, so one of the things I've wanted to do for a long time is to get some of the musical instruments from our collections out on display, and in a way it was difficult because they are not from Warwickshire. Jocelyn Morris, who was the curator of the museum in the 1950s, wanted to create a significant collection of musical instruments. So I wanted to bring some of those out. Things like the tarbell harpsichord
yes.
from the 18th century are a bit more tricky to actually put on display here, but we'll see what we can do. But obviously we have smaller items that will fit in these lovely big cases. So looking at the range of material that we have in the collection, but also wanting to make sure that the lute, the Hans Frei lute, was one of the first things that went on display, I decided to kind of group the musical instruments in time periods so that we could put a small collection on when we first opened, but also then change it for later musical instruments, keeping the refreshing of the displays and the information and the objects that we were displaying, changing.
Wonderful. And apart from the lute itself, what can you tell me about some of the other objects that you've selected here?
So with the lute are the silver trumpet made by William Bull, and that's sort of fanfare type.
Yes, looks rather splendid, doesn't it?
Yes, it's beautiful, and it's one of only 4 known examples of William Bull trumpets. There's another one, I believe, at the Ashmolean Museum. The other 2 items, woodwind instruments, are the Stainsbury recorders, again from the early 18th century, I think, and we have 2 trebles and 1 bass recorder. They're very beautiful, and they're sort of, again, along with the lute and the trumpet, are sort of the highlights of the musical instrument collection. And then we have a little spinet, which octave spinet, and it's kind of a portable keyboard. It's lovely.
It's a very funny thing, isn't it? Because when I first saw it in the displays here, I thought, wow, what an amazing thing. But then I started to look more closely, and actually it's a sort of a 19th century, not forgery, but it sort of pushes the boundaries, doesn't it?
Yeah, the mechanism itself, the spinet itself, the keyboard and the sort of string board are probably earlier. But it's been the spinet itself, the instrument, has been placed in what's probably a 19th century sewing box.
Why, in your opinion, does the museum have such a rich collection of musical instruments?
Well, it is essentially down to one person, or one person with the help of another. Jocelyn Morris was our the curator of the museum in the 1950s and 60s, and she kind of reopened the museum after the Second World War, and for the first time as a local authority-run museum. Before that, it had been run by the Warwickshire Natural History and Archaeological Society. And I think you can tell from her collecting at the time, she was very much focused on creating excellent, significant collections of particular types of object. So we have a very good basis for our costume collection because Jocelyn acquired significant pieces, but also in particular with the musical instruments. She set about, with the help of Eric Halfpenny, acquiring objects and musical instruments that represented a historical period. And so we are grateful to her and Eric Halfpenny for having the lute, the William Bull trumpet, the Stainsbury recorders, a Tarble harpsichord, all these wonderful things. And through these displays, we're hoping to sort of show more of them.
Well, it's such a pleasure to see these absolutely beautiful musical instruments on display again. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me.
That's okay, thank you.
To find out more about this wonderful instrument and to hear its music being played live on a replica, then join me on the 16th of November 2017 at the Warwick Marketplace Museum. Tickets are a mere £5 and can be bought in advance via the museum website.